The elf woman named Liara stood near the big window of the space station, and she looked at the dark ships coming from Earth, and her purple eyes grew wide with surprise, and she had lived for 300 years, but she had never seen anything like this before, and the ships were black, like the empty space itself, and they moved in ways that scared her deep inside. The alien woman next to her was called Cree, and she had green scales on her body, and she was shaking a little bit, and she pointed at the human ships with one clawed hand, and she said that humans called this group the Black Armada, and there were 20,000 warships in total, and each one was covered in black metal that was very strong. Lara pressed her thin fingers on the clear window and watched the human vessels move closer, and the ships had sharp edges and many weapons on them, and the weapons looked very dangerous, and she could see big guns that could shoot metal very fast, and other weapons that used super hot gas to burn things, and there were even more weapons that her computer could not identify. At Alcree pulled up a floating screen that showed information about the human fleet, and her hands were shaking more now, and she told Liara that Earth had built all these ships in only 6 months, and that seemed impossible because most species needed many years to build even a small fleet, and humans had created the biggest Armada anyone had ever seen in half a year. Lyra felt cold fear in her chest because she understood what this meant, and humans were not like other young species, and they could build and fight in ways that old species could not match, and the galaxy had made a big mistake by not watching humans more carefully. Weeks before this moment, the Harath Collective had come to Earth with 400 big warships, and they had told humans to give up their planet and become slaves, or they would destroy everything. And the Harath were very confident because they had conquered 40 other planets before, and they thought humans would be scared and give up quickly, but humans had laughed at them, and then they built the Black Armada to show the Reth what a real fleet looked like. A human woman appeared on the big screen in front of Liara and Cree, and the woman wore a black uniform with 5 stars on her collar, and her name was Admiral Rebecca Hayes, and she had brown hair tied back tight and green eyes that looked very cold and serious, and Liara could tell this woman had made many hard choices in her life. Admiral Hayes spoke in a calm voice that went to every ship in the star system, and she said that the Hearth Collective had come to Earth and threatened human families, and the Hearth thought humans would surrender because humans were young and weak. And she paused for a moment, and then she smiled, but it was not a nice smile, and she said, the Harath were wrong about humans. The Black Armada started moving toward the Harath fleet, and the human ships did not move in straight lines like most species did, and instead they moved in patterns that looked random and confused. But Liara had military training, and she saw what the humans were really doing, and they were making zones where any enemy ship would be hit from many angles at once, and it was very smart and very deadly. The Harath leader was named War Master. Thrakani had a body like a big insect, and he was very angry, and he sent his own message saying that the Reth had conquered many worlds, and their warriors were bred just for fighting, and humans were primitive and weak and would be crushed easily. Admiral Hayes did not say anything back, and she just raised her hand and brought it down fast, like a chopping motion. Then the battle started, and space filled with fire, and Death. Liara had studied human history when she was assigned to watch Earth for the Galactic Council, and she had read about human wars and how humans like to fight and how they used big weapons to solve their problems, and reading about it in books was very different from seeing it happen in front of her eyes. The Black Armada fired all their weapons at the same time with perfect timing, and the coordination was better than most old species could manage, and big metal bullets flew at speeds close to light speed, and they hit Reth ships and turned them into clouds of broken metal, and fire and missiles filled the space between the fleets, and each missile was very smart and could dodge enemy defenses, and then they exploded against Reth shields and guns. The worst weapons were the plasma lances, and these were beams of gas as hot as stars, and they cut through Reth capital ships like the ships were made of soft butter, and the Reth formation that had looked so strong just moments ago started to fall apart under the human attack, and ships exploded everywhere, and the light from the explosions was bright enough to hurt Liara's eyes, even through The filtered window Cree made a scared sound and said that humans were not even using all their weapons yet, and her sensors showed that human ships had other weapon systems that had not activated, and Liara looked at her own computer screen and felt ice in her blood because the computer was showing warnings about human weapons it could not understand. Some weapons could bend space and time, and some could make entire atmospheres catch fire, and some were just labeled as probability hazard, which made no sense at all. And Liara realized that humans had created weapons that were beyond what the galaxy thought was possible. The Reth tried to fight back with everything they had, and their warriors were brave and had been trained since birth to fight, and they threw their ships at the human line without fear of death, and they managed to destroy 3 human destroyers before the Black Armada changed their tactics and started to take apart the Reth fleet piece by piece with cold efficiency warmster Orcs. Flagship tried to run away, and it was called the Pride of the Swarm, and Admiral Hayes sent 5 battleships to chase it down, and the chase lasted 14 minutes before the Pride's power reactor exploded and created a brief new star in the darkness of space. 7 minutes after the first shot was fired, the battle was over, and the Reth Collective was destroyed as a fighting force, and of their 400 big warships, only 17 were left in good enough shape to escape, and those only survived because the humans let them go on. Perpicellura understood why Admiral Hayes had let some escape, and she said out loud that Hayes was sending a message, and she wanted survivors to go back and tell everyone what happened here, and tell them what humans could do when someone threatened them. Admiral Hayes appeared on the screen again, and her face had not changed, even though her fleet had just killed thousands of enemy ships, and she spoke to the entire galaxy and said that Earth was not a target, and humans were not prey, and they were not victims. And she leaned forward, and Liara saw the strength in her eyes, and Hayes said that humans were the line that no one should cross, and anyone who tested them again would regret it badly. The Black Armada turned around and started going back too. Earth and the ships moved in perfect formation, even though there was burning debris everywhere, and Liara watched them go and felt the weight of this moment because she knew the galaxy had just changed. Forever Cree asked what they should tell the Galactic Council, and Liara knew this would be a hard conversation. Ia turned away from the window and started walking toward the council. Chambers in her mind was already thinking about what she would say and how she would explain what had just happened, and this would change everything in the galaxy, and she knew the old species would not want to hear the truth about human. Cree followed behind her, and the scaled alien was still shaking, and she kept looking back at the window where the human ships were getting smaller in the distance, and she said that the council would not believe what they had seen, and some council members would think it was a trick, or that the Reth had been weak. Liara shook her head and said the council would have to believe them because the evidence was floating in space. Right now, and thousands of Reth ships were nothing but debris, and the few survivors would tell their story to anyone who would listen, and soon the whole galaxy would know that humans were not a species to threaten. They entered the council chambers, and the room was very large, with seats arranged in circles going up toward the ceiling, and representatives from 40 different species were sitting there, and they were all talking at once, and their voices mixed together in a loud noise that hurt Leora's sensitive elf ears. The council leader was a being made of energy that lived in a containment suit, and its name was very long, so everyone just called it Speaker, and Speaker raised one glowing appendage, and the room became quiet, and all eyes turned to look at Liara and Cree as they walked to the center of the chamber. Speaker asked in a voice that sounded like wind chimes what had happened at Earth, and why the Reth Collective fleet had been destroyed, and Liara took a deep breath and began to speak, and she told them everything she had witnessed him. She did not leave out any details because the council needed to understand what humans were capable of. A representative from the Voxian Empire stood up, and he was tall with blue skin and 4 arms, and he said that Liara must be exaggerating, and no young species could build 20,000 warships in 6 months, and it was impossible, and Liara must have counted wrong or been fooled by human tricks. Liara pulled up the sensor data from the station and projected it into the air, where everyone could see, and the holographic display showed the entire battle from start to finish, and the council members watched in silence as human ships tore through the Wrath fleet like it was nothing. Another representative spoke up, and this one was from a species that looked like floating jellyfish, and she said that the Wrath must have been unprepared or their ships must have malfunctioned, and there was no way humans could fight that well. Because they had only been in space for 200 years, stepped forward and her voice was stronger now, and she said that the Wrath had been at full combat readiness, and their ships had worked perfectly, and the problem was not with the Wrath but with everyone's understanding of humans, and humans were not like other species, and they had something that made them very dangerous. Speaker asked what that something was, and Kree said it was the human ability to make war, and humans had spent their entire history fighting each other, and they had developed weapons and tactics that the peaceful galaxy could not imagine, and now humans had turned all that experience outward toward the stars. An old diplomat from the Sylvan Confederation stood up, and he was an elf like Lyara, but much older, and he had lived for 1,000 years, and he said that the council should send an apology to Earth and offer humans a seat on the council immediately, and the galaxy needed to make friends with humans before humans decided to become an Amizi, but a military commander from the Korthak Federation objected, and he was covered in thick armor plates and had weapons built into his body. And he said that the council should not show weakness, and humans needed to learn their place, and the Korthak could gather a fleet of 10,000 ships and teach humans to respect the old power. Sliara felt anger rise in her chest, and she spoke loudly and said that anyone who attacked Earth now would be making the worst mistake in galactic history, and the Black Armada had only shown a fraction of human capability, and humans had more weapons they had not used and more ships they had not deployed, and any species that went to war with humans would be destroyed. The Korthak commander laughed and said that Lyara had been scared by a simple display of force, and humans were still young and weak, and they just had good weapons, but weapons alone did not win wars. Speaker raised its glowing appendage again and asked Lyara for her professional military assessment, and Lyara had served as a fleet commander for 2 centuries, and she knew war better than most beings in the galaxy. And she spoke with complete certainty. She said that humans would win any conventional war against any single species in the galaxy, and maybe even against several species working together, and the reason was not just their weapons, but their thinking. And humans approached war differently than civilized species did, and they did not fight to gain territory or resources, and they fought to eliminate threats completely sure. Said that when humans went to war, they did not stop until the enemy surrendered or was destroyed, and they did not accept negotiated settlements in the middle of battles, and they did not show mercy to those who threatened their families, and the Black Armada had proven this by destroying the Wrath fleet so quickly and so thoroughly. A small furry representative from a merchant species asked what the council should do now, and its voice was scared, and it said that its people did not want war, and they just wanted to trade and live in peace. Oyara said the answer was simple, and the council should recognize Earth as a sovereign power and should offer humans full membership in the council, and should establish trade relations and defensive pacts, and most importantly, the council should make it very clear to every species in the galaxy that Earth was protected, and anyone who attacked humans would face the wrath of the entire council. The Korthak commander objected again, said this would give humans too much power, and they would become arrogant and dangerous, and the council would regret treating them as an equal. Speaker made a sound like crystal breaking, and said that the Korthak commander was missing the point, and humans were already equals whether the council acknowledged it or not, and the question was not whether humans deserved a council seat, but whether the council wanted humans as friends or enemies. The chamber fell silent, and everyone understood what its speaker meant, and the old galactic order was over, and a new power had arrived, and the council could either adapt or come irrelevant. Liara looked around at all the representatives, and she saw fear in many faces and uncertainty in others, and a few looked angry, but none of them looked ready to challenge humans, and that told her everything she needed to know about the future. Speaker called for a vote on whether to offer Earth a council seat and to send a diplomatic mission to make peace with humans, and the vote was not unanimous, but it passed by a large majority, and even the Korthak commander abstained rather than vote against. Etofter the Votliara left the chamber and walked back to the observation deck, and the space where the battle had happened was still visible in cleanup crews. They were starting to gather the debris, and she wondered what the humans were doing now, and whether they knew how much they had changed the galaxy back on Earth. Admiral Rebecca Hayes stood in the command center of the orbital defense station, and around her were dozens of officers, watching screens that showed the Black Armada returning home, and the battle had been won, but Hayes knew the real work was just beginning. A young officer named Lieutenant Jennifer Morris approached Hayes and reported that all human ships were accounted for and casualties were light considering the size of the engagement, and they had lost 3 destroyers and 2 frigates, but all other vessels were intact and functional. Hayes nodded and asked about the enemy survivors, and Morris said that 17 Heth ships had escaped into faster-than-light travel, and they were heading back toward Hreth space, and Hayes said that was good because those survivors would spread the word about what happened. Here another officer came forward, and this one was older with gray hair, and she was Captain Amanda Rodriguez, and she said that the Galactic Council was requesting communication, and they wanted to send a diplomatic mission to Earth, and Rodriguez asked if Hayes wanted to respond. Hayes thought for a moment, and then said to tell the Council that Earth would welcome their diplomats, but the meeting would happen on human terms and in human space, and the Council would come to them, not the other way around. Rodriguez smiled and said she would send that message, and Hayes could see approval in the captain's eyes, because humans were done being the newcomers who had to prove themselves worthy, and now the old powers would come to them. With respect, Hayes walked to the window of the command center and looked down at Earth below, and the planet was blue and green and beautiful, and it was home to 8 billion people who had almost been enslaved or killed. Brother Heth and she had built the Black Armada to protect them, and now they were safe. A voice came from behind her, and it was General Thomas Wright, who commanded Earth's ground forces, and he asked Hayes if she thought the battle would prevent future attacks or encourage them. Hayes said it would do both, and some species would see human strength and decide to become friends, but others would see it as a challenge and would want to test themselves against humanity, and the galaxy was big, and there were many different kinds of beings out there with many different motivations. Wright said that Earth needed to stay ready then, and Hayes agreed and said the Black Armada was just the beginning, and humans needed to expand their fleet and build more weapons and establish bases throughout their local space, because the galaxy had noticed them now, and that meant both opportunities and dangers. Several hours later, Hayes attended a meeting with Earth's civilian government, and the President of the United Earth Alliance was there, along with representatives from all the major nations and regions, and they wanted to know what would happen next. The president was a woman named Patricia Anderson, and she had been elected 2 years ago on a platform of peace and cooperation, but the Hreth threat had forced her to support the military buildup, and now she asked Hayes what Earth should do with the power they had demonstrated. Hayes said that Earth need to be very careful about how they used their military strength, and humans had shown they could fight and win, but they should not become the aggressors that they had just defeated, and the Black Armada should be a shield, not a sword. A representative from the Asian Federation asked if Earth should join the Galactic Council, and Hayes said yes, because being part of the Council would give humans a voice in galactic politics and would help prevent misunderstandings that could lead to war. Other representative from the African Union said that Earth should demand reparations from the Hreth Collective for threatening humanity, and Hayes shook her head and said the Hreth had already paid the price for their aggression, and taking more from them would only create resentment and possibly future conflicts. President Anderson asked what Earth's relationship with other species should be going forward, and Hayes said that humans should be friendly but firm and should offer trade and cooperation, but should never appear weak or vulnerable in the galaxy. Respected strength, and Earth needed to maintain the military capability to defend itself. The meeting continued for several more hours, and many decisions were made about Earth's future in the galaxy, and Hayes participated in all of it, but her mind kept going back to the battle and the Hreth ships exploding, and the people who had died in those ships. She did not enjoy killing, and she was not proud of the destruction the Black Armada had caused, but she had done what was necessary to protect Earth, and that was what mattered, and if she had to do it again, she would make the same choices 3 days after the battle. A Galactic Council delegation arrived at Earth, and they came in 5 ships that were elegant and beautiful, unlike the brutal efficiency of human war vessels, and the ships requested permission to enter Earth orbit, and Hayes granted it. The delegation was led by Liara, the elf woman who had witnessed the battle, and she came aboard the orbital defense station with a small group of other aliens, and Hayes met them in a conference room that had been prepared for diplomatic meetings. Liara was tall and graceful, with purple eyes and pointed ears, and she wore robes that seemed to shimmer with inner light, and she looked at Hayes with an expression that mixed respect and caution, and Hayes understood that this alien had seen what humans could do and was being very careful. The elf woman spoke in accented but clear English and said that the Galactic Council wanted to formally apologize for not intervening when the Wrath threatened. Earth and the Council had been too slow to act, and humans had been forced to defend themselves. Alone Hayes said that Earth appreciated the apology, but actions would speak louder than words, and the Council needed to show that they would stand with humanity going forward. Liara nodded and said that the Council was prepared to offer Earth full membership and a permanent seat in the chamber, and humans would have equal voice with all other species and would be recognized as a sovereign power with all rights and protections. That entailed Hayes asked what the Council expected from Earth in return, and Liara said that Earth would be expected to contribute to galactic security and to follow Council laws and to participate in trade and diplomatic relations like any other member species. One of Hayes's advisors asked about military commitments and whether Earth would be required to send ships to fight in Council conflicts, and Liara said that Council members were encouraged but not required to participate in defensive actions, and Earth would make its own decisions about when and where to deploy forces. As Hayes considered this for a moment and then said that Earth would accept Council membership on those terms, and humans were ready to take their place in the galactic communitalia. Looked relieved and said that this was good news and it would help establish peace and stability in the region, and she believed that humans and the other species could build a prosperous future together. Hayes said she hoped that was true, but warned that humans would not tolerate any threats or attempts to manipulate them, and Earth had proven it could defend itself and would not hesitate to do so again if necessary. The elf woman said she understood and that the Council had learned its lesson about underestimating humanity, and from now on, Earth would be treated with the respect it deserved. 6 months passed after Earth joined the Galactic Council, and the galaxy had changed in many ways because of human presence, and trade routes were established between Earth and dozens of other worlds, and human merchants were spreading throughout the stars selling goods and buying alien technology. Liara had been assigned as the official Council liaison to Earth, and she lived on the orbital defense station now and worked closely with Admiral Hayes and other human leaders, and over time, she came to understand humans better and realized they were more complex than she had first thought. One day Liara was reviewing reports in her office when Hayes came to visit, and the Admiral looked tired but satisfied, and she said that the Black Armada had just completed joint exercises with several other Council fleets, and the training had gone very well. Yara asked how the other species had reacted to working with human forces, and Hayes smiled and said that most of them had been impressed, but also intimidated. And human tactics were very different from what other species used, and it made some aliens uncomfortable. The elf woman said she understood because humans approached combat in ways that seemed aggressive to species that preferred defensive strategies. And human doctrine emphasized overwhelming force and rapid decisive action, while most aliens tried to minimize casualties and limit destruction. Hayes sat down across from Liara and said that humans had learned these tactics through thousands of years of warfare against each other, and when humans fought, they fought to win completely, because anything less meant the conflict would continue and cause more suffering in the long run. Liara said that this philosophy made sense from a certain perspective, but it frightened many species who saw humans as potential conquerors, and Hayes needed to understand that not everyone trusted human intentions, despite Earth's peaceful action so far. The Admiral nodded and said she knew that humans had an image problem and the Black Armada was necessary for defense, but it also made humans look threatening, and Earth needed to find ways to demonstrate peaceful intentions without appearing weak. They talked for a while about various diplomatic challenges, and Liara suggested that Earth could participate in humanitarian missions and disaster relief operations, and show the galaxy that human strength could be used for good as well as war. Hayes said that was an excellent idea and she would propose it to the civilian government, and maybe Earth could send medical ships and engineering teams to help species in need. A few weeks later, an opportunity arose when a mining colony in the Outer Rim sent a distress call and an asteroid had hit their main habitat dome, and thousands of aliens were trapped without life support, and the Galactic Council was organizing a rescue. Mission Earth volunteered to send ships, and Hayes personally led a task force of 5 vessels to the disaster site, and the ships arrived faster than any other Council vessels because human engines were more powerful and efficient when they reached the colony. Hayes deployed teams of engineers and medics, and the humans worked tirelessly for 3 days straight to rescue survivors and repair the habitat, and they saved over 4,000 alien lives. The species that lived in the colony were called the Frail, and they were small furry beings who had never met humans before, and they had heard stories about the fearsome Black Armada, but now they saw humans risking their own lives to save frail children and families. The Frail leader came to Hayes after the rescue was complete, and he was crying tears of gratitude, and he said that his people had been wrong about humans, and they had thought Earth people were violent and dangerous, but now they saw that humans had kind hearts despite their powerful weapons. Hayes told him that humans believed in protecting those who could not protect themselves, and that strength without compassion was meaningless, and the Frail leader said he would tell everyone in the galaxy about what humans had done. Here, news of the rescue spread quickly through Council space, and many species started to see humans in a new light, and trade agreements increased, and diplomatic relations improved, and Earth began to be known for more than just military power. But not everyone was happy about humanity's rising influence, and the Korthok Federation in particular resented how quickly humans had gained respect and power, and the Korthok were a warrior culture that valued strength above all else, and they saw humans as upstarts who had not earned their position. The Korthok's supreme commander was named Vrok, and he was massive even for his species and covered in battle scars and weapons implants, and he began making speeches about how humans were a threat to the traditional galactic order. Vrok said that the Council had made a mistake by giving humans a seat at the table, and Earth should have been made to prove itself over centuries like other species, and now humans were acting like they owned the galaxy, and something needed to be done about it. Liara heard about these speeches and warned Hayes that the Korthok might try to challenge humanity, and Hayes said she hoped it would not come to that, but Earth would be ready if it did. Tensions continued to build over the next few months, and then an incident occurred at a space station on the UHL border between human and Korthok space, and a human merchant ship was approached by Korthok warships and ordered to submit to inspections. The human captain refused and said that his ship was in neutral space, and the Korthok had no authority to board it, and the Korthok commander said that they suspected the ship of carrying illegal weapons and would board by force if necessary. The human captain sent a distress signal, and an Earth patrol ship arrived within minutes, and the patrol ship was much smaller than the Korthok vessels, but the human commander ordered the Korthok to back off and leave the merchant alone. Vrok himself was commanding the Korthok fleet, and he saw this as an opportunity to test human resolve, and he ordered his ships to ignore the human patrol vessel and proceed with boarding the merchant ship. The human patrol commander asked Hayes for instructions, and Hayes gave a single clear order, and she said to defend the merchant ship with all necessary force, and do not fire first, but do not back down. The situation was tense for several minutes, and then Vrok made his move and ordered his ships to begin boarding procedures, and the human patrol ship immediately moved to block them and powered up, laughed, and said that one small human ship could not stop his fleet, and he ordered his vessels to push through, and the Korthok ships moved forward. Expecting the human to retreat, instead, the human patrol ship opened fire with precision strikes and disabled the engines on 2 Korthok vessels in less than 10 seconds, and then the ship broadcast a message saying that any further aggression would be met with lethal force. Vrock was shocked because he had not expected such a quick and effective response, and he realized that the human ship was not bluffing and more human vessels were. Already jumping into the system in response to the distress call, the Korthok commander had two choices, and he could escalate into a full battle that might start a war, or he could back down and lose face in front of his warriors. And after a long moment, he ordered his ships to withdraw. The incident became known as the border standoff, and it demonstrated that humans would not be intimidated, even by larger forces, and Earth was willing to fight to protect its citizens. And Rock was humiliated by the encounter, and his standing among the Korthok decreased and many started to question whether challenging humans was wise, and the Korthok Federation began to reconsider its hostile stance toward Earth 1 year after. Earth joined the Galactic Council. A new threat emerged that would test the alliance between humans and aliens, and a species called the Dravok appeared from beyond the galactic rim, and they were unlike anything the Council had encountered before. The Dravok were machine intelligences that had destroyed their organic creators millions of years ago, and now they've traveled through space, consuming resources and eliminating any biological life. They encountered and they had wiped out 3 minor species before the Council even knew they existed. Liara was in emergency council session when the news came in, and speakers showed holographic images of Dravok war machines, and they were massive constructs of metal and energy that moved through space like a swarm of locusts, and wherever they went, they left only dead worlds behind. A council military advisors said that the Dravok fleet numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and they were advancing toward council space along a broad front. And if they were not stopped, they would consume everything in their path. The representatives began arguing about how to respond, and some wanted to evacuate threatened worlds, while others wanted to negotiate, and a few suggested building a massive defensive line and hoping the Dravok would turn away. Hayes was attending the session via holographic link, and she listened to all the proposals, and then she spoke up and said that none of those options would work, and the Dravok were not interested in negotiation, and they could not be avoided or deterred, and the only option was to fight them. And when the Korthok representative, who was not Vrock, but a new commander named Thrak, said that even the mighty humans could not defeat a fleet of hundreds of thousands, and the Council should focus on survival, not victory, Hayes said that she agreed. The odds were bad, but giving up was not acceptable, and Earth would fight the Dravok with or without Council support, and she asked, how many other species were willing to stand and defend their homes? There was silence in the chamber, and then Liara stood and said that the Sylvan Confederation would join Earth, and the elves had survived for millions of years by defending what was theirs, and they would not run from. Machines one by one, other representatives stood and pledged their fleets, and in the end, 30 species committed to fighting alongside humanity, and it was the largest military alliance in galactic history. Hayes said that she would coordinate the defense and asked all allied fleets to assemble at a staging point near the edge of council space, and they would meet the Dravok there and either stop them or die trying over. The next 2 weeks the allied fleets gathered, and Hayes had never commanded so many ships before, and there were vessels from dozens of different species, all with different capabilities and doctrines, and getting them to work together was a massive challenge. Jal worked closely with Hayes to organize the fleet, and the elf woman had centuries of military experience and understood how different species fought, and together they created a battle plan that used each species' strengths while minimizing weaknesses. The human contingent was the Black Armada, plus additional ships that had been built over the past year, and Earth now fielded 30,000 war vessels, and it was the largest single fleet in the alliance of their species, contributed what they could. And the Sylvan Confederation sent 10,000 elegant cruisers, and the Korthok Federation sent 8,000 heavy battleships, and various other species added smaller numbers until the total allied fleet numbered over 100,000 ships. Hayes gave a speech to all the commanders before the battle, and she said that they were about to face an enemy that wanted to destroy everything they loved and everyone they cared about, and the Dravok would show no mercy and expected none in return. She said that the Allied fleet represented the best of what the galaxy had to offer, and dozens of species working together for a common cause, and if they won today, They would prove that organic life was stronger than cold machines. The speech was translated into 40 different languages and broadcast to every ship in the fleet, and when Hayes finished speaking there was a moment of silence, and then every vessel sounded their battle horns in acknowledgement. The Dravik arrived 3 hours later, and their fleet was even larger than intelligence reports had suggested, and there were 500,000, ranging from small fighters to planet-sized battle stations, and they moved with perfect coordination like a single organism. Hayes ordered the Allied fleet into defensive formation, and the plan was to create layers of overlapping fire that would destroy Dravik vessels as they advanced, and human ships formed the core of the defense with other species providing support. The battle began when the Dravik opened fire at extreme range, and energy beams crossed the vast distance between fleets, and shields flared as the Allied vessels absorbed the incoming fire, and Hayes waited until the Dravik were closer before ordering return fire. When the Allied fleet opened up, the space between the two forces became a storm of weapons, fire, and human. Railguns punched through Dravik armor and elf energy weapons melted machine hulls and Korthok missiles found their targets with devastating accuracy, but the Dravik kept coming, and they did not care about losses, and for every machine destroyed, 2 more took its place, and the Allied fleet began taking casualties, and ships exploded one after another as Dravik weapons found weak points in defenses. Hayes saw that the defensive strategy was not working, and the Dravik had too many ships and would overwhelm the Allies through sheer numbers, and she made a decision that would either win the battle or lose everything. She ordered the Black Armada to break formation and charged directly into the center of the Dravik fleet and human ships, accelerated to attack speed, and drove like a spear into the enemy. The other species commanders thought Hayes had gone mad, but Lyara understood what the human was doing, and she ordered the Sylvan fleet to follow the humans and create a wedge that could split the Dravik formation in half. The Black Armada crashed into the Dravik center like a hammer, and human ships fired in all directions and destroyed everything around them, and the momentum of the charge carried them deep into enemy space, and behind them the Sylvan and Korthok fleets followed and widened the gap. The Dravik fleet began to lose coordination as their formation broke apart, and machines on one side could not support machines on the other, and the Allied forces exploited this weakness and began destroying Dravik vessels in huge numbers. Hayes ordered all ships to activate their most powerful weapons, and human vessels fired experimental devices that created temporary black holes and collapsed space around Dravik battle stations, and the machines were crushed by Gravitaliara commanded her fleet with precision, and elf ships moved like dancers through the chaos, and their weapons cut apart Dravik vessels with surgical accuracy, and the elves lost fewer ships than any other species because of their skill. The Korthok fought with brutal courage, and their heavy ships took enormous punishment, but kept fighting, and Thrak himself led charges that destroyed key Dravik command nodes and disrupted machine coordination even further. The battle lasted for 16 hours, and by the end, the Allied fleet had destroyed over 300,000 Dravik vessels, and the remaining machines retreated back beyond the galactic rim. The Allies had won, but the cost was terrible, and 30,000 Allied ships had been destroyed, and over 2 million beings had died, and every surviving vessel was damaged to some degree. Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship and looked at the casualty reports and felt the weight of all those deaths on her shoulders, and she had made the call to charge into the enemy, and many had died because of that decision. Liara came to find Hayes after the battle, and the elf woman had burns on her arms from a fire on her ship, and she said that Hayes had saved the galaxy, and the charge into the Dravik center had been brilliant, and without it, the Allies would have been destroyed. Hayes said that too many had died, and Liara said yes, but billions had lived because of those deaths, and that was the terrible mathematics of war, and Hayes had done what was necessary. And the days after the battle, Galactic Council held a ceremony to honor the fallen, and representatives from every species came together to mourn their dead and celebrate their victory. Speaker said that the Alliance had proven that the galaxy was stronger together than divided, and that humans had shown themselves to be not just powerful warriors, but also wise leaders who others could follow. Into battle, Hayes was given the highest military honor the council could bestow, and so was Liara and Thrak, and dozens of other commanders who had fought with distinction. The Korthak representative approached Hayes after the ceremony, and he said that his people had been wrong about humans, and Earth had proven itself worthy of respect through courage and sacrifice, and from now on the Korthak would be proud to call humans their allies. Hayes said that she was honored and hoped that all the species of the galaxy could continue working together, because there would be other threats in the future, and they would need each other. Liara stood with Hayes and looked up at the stars and said that humanity had changed the galaxy forever, and the old ways of thinking were gone, and a new era had begun where species worked together as equals. Hayes said she hoped that was true because the universe was dangerous and full of unknowns, and the only way to survive was to stand together.